So, hey everyone, this is Adam Bush from the Champaign Blockchain Meetup Group. It's great to have Sam Chen here from the Gies College of Business, the Disruption Lab, and also joined by Eric Helms from the Smart Contract Audit Token DAO. And Eric's going to be talking with us about his project for the audit program he's doing on the Cardano blockchain and the way he set up his tokens and his DeFi endeavors. And Sam, do you have anything you want to start off with?
Oh, no, I just want to welcome Eric and thank you, Adam, for arranging this opportunity for us to hear from someone in the real industry starting DAO. We're very fortunate to have everyone here.
Absolutely. Well, thanks so much. I'll turn it over to Eric so you can give us your presentation and let us know what you're up to.
All right. Thanks a lot, guys. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Host disabled participant screen sharing. Could you enable that, Adam?
Should be good now.
Yep. All right. I think we're in business. You guys can see it, yeah?
Yep, I can see.
All right. I hope I don't get a bunch of messages throughout this. All right. So, hey, everyone. This is a presentation on smart contract audit token. Pleasure to be here with UIUC. I have a background in accounting and finance. A lot of people I've worked with in the industry are actually from UIUC. I'm sure you all know that you guys have a pretty strong accounting program there. So yeah, a lot of people over the years have been working with, so excited to be here. Wasn't too sure exactly what to present on, so I have some slides about, our project in general, and then kind of about just starting, people that are going about starting a project, a DAO or a DeFi project, the steps involved in that, or some tips and, discussion. If anybody on here has any questions as we're going through it, please feel free to jump in, and, some back and forth is totally welcomed. Okay. All right. So who is this guy? As I said, my name is Eric Helms. I'm the founder of the Smart Contract Audit Token. I'm a CPA with 10 years of experience in financial statement audit in Big 4 and Fortune 500. And I'm not a dev. So I think one of the interesting takeaways from that is I don't really have a background in computer science. It was more in economics and accounting. I would say that for the most part, having a background and understanding programming or understanding the programming language that you're working in is always going to be a plus. I'm envious of that. I've tried to learn a little bit of Python just to understand how programming works and get an understanding of it. But it's not something that if you don't have that experience, it doesn't mean that you can't pursue it or can't be involved in a blockchain project, I think is the key takeaway. Why this is giving me some issues with this. All right, so what is Smart Contract Audit Token? It's a decentralized audit service that we're building on Cardano. And the goal of it is to remove the conflict of interest and lack of independence that comes from paying for an audit service. So I think most of the people that are watching this recording, a lot of you are probably from the business school, a lot of you probably even taken audit classes, right? One of the main things that they talk about in audit class is this concept of independence, right? For the people to be able to trust the results of your audit that you're going through, there's supposed to be this level of independence between you and the people that you're auditing, right? If your mother is auditing your company, then there's going to be some questions of independence there, right? But how can you really be independent at the end of the day when you're auditing your boss, right? These are the people that are hiring you. These are the people that are paying you. And oftentimes, if you want to continue being paid or continue working for them, then you want them to be happy at some level, right? And so there's always been this inherent conflict of interest in the audit industry around this, right? I think that we've seen some of the worst examples in the industry come from back in the early 2000s with Enron and Tyco and WorldCom, where you have Arthur Andersen, that is the most reputable audit firm in the world at the time. It was the Big Eight, and they were the top of the class. And even they were found committing massive fraud because they wanted to maintain the consulting fees that they were getting. So they were willing to fudge the audit results. Now that's an extreme example. And I would say that when it comes to blockchain, it's more of a collaborative effort where if you're going through and you're auditing the smart contracts, you want to find bugs and you want to find issues. And the dev team will usually want you to find bugs and find issues because it helps their product overall. Like most of them are acting in good faith and they want you to find these things, right? However, it's always going to create this question of, are these auditors acting in the best interest? Are they really working on the dev team's behalf? What if the dev team isn't acting in good faith and they can just hire someone that's going to do a pay for play type of scenario, right? So anytime that we have this model, it's always going to lead to this question of, who are they working for? Whose interests do they have at heart, right? So that's kind of the heart of the issue. So we get around that by cutting out that mechanism. Having a dev team seek out an auditor and paying that auditor, and the dev team owning the audit results, that I would argue is not the right way to do it. We get around that by setting up an organization where the token holders choose projects they want to have assurance over. So, if the group says, hey, this new lending app is coming out, I want to use it, I want to invest in it, I'd like some assurance over it, I would like to see it audited, right? The organization can then vote and say, okay, is this something that we, as a group want to see? If they do, then they say, okay, this is going to be one of the ones that we're going to cover. And our treasury funds the operations itself. So the audit is funded by us. It's, after it's completed, the audit report is our property that we own and, can distribute the way that we want. And there is no middleman in there that was involved. It's us seeking out assurance and us obtaining insurance, right? Assurance. And so I would say that, by doing it in this specific method, it makes it so that there is no reason or question to ever wonder if these audit results are accurate, right? So how does the funding work? And then can you guys see the slides, or are the heads in the way for you guys?
No, you look good.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so how does this funding work? So as I said, we're cutting out the middleman so that we're self-funding these audit projects, right? How are we able to do that as an organization? So high level, and maybe it might be too high, we can always go into some questions, but we create a governance token that controls our DAO. That's necessary because you need some way to manage the DAO, right? So you issue a governance token, and that's used to make proposals, choose what we're going to audit. Literally all aspects of it are controlled by the token holders on a one-to-one basis. So if you own 10 tokens, you get 10 votes. Then a portion of these tokens are distributed through an ISPO, which I'm not sure, an ISPO is kind of specific to Cardano. I'm not sure if too many of the people viewing this would understand it if they're not too involved in Cardano, but we can think of it as an ICO. It's essentially distributing tokens to the public at the first time in exchange for some other token that already has established value. So trading your governance token for ADA or Ethereum or whatever it is, but it's that initial transfer to the public, right? So you do that, you do the ISPO or the ICO, and you've now, let's say that it's a million tokens that you sent out there, and you generated $1 million with it. And these are all hypothetical numbers, right? So you have $1 million worth of ADA that you've now generated, and you have a percentage of the tokens that the treasury now owns. So you have your own tokens and an equivalent value of ADA or Ethereum or whatever it is. You can now take these and create a trading pair on a decentralized exchange, right? So the way decentralized exchanges work, anyone can provide liquidity to those, and the people that provide liquidity get a share in the trading fees that are made, right? So you put that token up there. As trading fees go, if people buy and sell it, you get a portion of the fees that are made, and then you would use those fees to fund your operations. Now, of course, that's all going to be dependent on how much interest there is in the token and how much trading volume there is. If there's zero volume, you're not going to generate any revenue from that. If there's high volume, then you would end up, doing all right. Going through and mapping and modeling it, if there was roughly $500,000 of trading volume daily, which on Ethereum is a minuscule, very, very small amount of trading volume. On Cardano, that's not humongous, it's one of the larger ones, but the goal is to get to that level. But with around $500,000 of trading volume, you'd be able to do about 1 audit a month, which, starting off, that's a decent amount. Ideally scaling up, if the audits were doing good and you were providing assurance to the community, and people were liking the model, then you would grow from there, right? But that's the basic way that you use a governance token and use this treasury model in order to generate funds. And again, that would be non-depleting because the money that you put in the treasury, there'd be impermanent loss that would be potentially affected by, but the money is always in there. So it's not like you're taking money that you generated from an ICO and spending chunks of it each month. Since you're doing it by generating fees, it's theoretically able to do it in perpetuity, right? And so that is the basic concept of how the treasury would be able to fund these types of audits.
By the way, Eric and Adam, hold off on the questions until the end, right? Or
you can ask them now, or you can ask them at the end. Either one. Sometimes it's hard to remember what we talked about. What's up?
I said I'm open to whatever you would want, but I do have questions about this, but I can.
I think go ahead and jump in. We'd love to have your question answer.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're creating this trading pair with ADA, releasing it on the DEX. My question is, how did you evolve your confidence in the trading volume on your token? Meaning that, I mean, you yourself said that if there's no interest in the token, then you're not going to expect any revenue. But my question is, what did you do to ensure interest in the token to then, sustain sort of confidence in all the other operations you're going to perform?
Excellent question. So we kind of have some backups or some other possibilities, right? I would say that initially, until you're proving that this is something that is working and a good idea, it's theoretically possible that people won't be as interested in it, right? And so there's a few different ways that we would do it early on. For one of them, we're going to have a pool where in Cardano you set up. What's the best way to describe it?
I can take a crack with Cardano. So are you going to describe the ISPO?
Well, the ISPO is how we're going to generate the funding, but after that, we're going to have a stake pool that was going to be running for a while. If you wanted to describe that briefly, that'd be great.
Sure.
Okay.
So with the Cardano proof of stake system, you get a return of about 4.5%, or if you own the entire pool yourself, closer to 5% in just transaction fees and treasury payout is coming from the platform itself. So by holding,
Or be the Cardano platform itself.
Yeah, from the Cardano platform itself, right? Yeah. So by holding, by running a stake pool and holding a portion of the treasury in the pool, I'm guessing you're going to be generating that revenue. That's a model that a lot of people use.
Okay.
So that would be an additional source of income to try to supplement things. And then also there's about 30% of the token supply that's held by the treasury that's used for participation rewards, right? So we would also have the opportunity early on to say, hey, if you're going to do certain tasks or certain audits or certain jobs, we can give you some ADA if we're making less, or quite a few more of the government's tokens. And that's preferable because ideally we want to encourage people participating in the DAO, and people that are doing the work. Those are the people that you also want to have a say and have a vote in that too, right? So there's a certain percentage of tokens that you would say, okay, we don't have as much ADA early on, or our revenue, we're not generating as much as that. So we would give more of our own tokens as participation rewards to try to spur some of that. Then we also have the other option, let's say, and again, theoretical numbers, that we generated 1 million ADA from doing the ISPO, right? So then you would say, okay, what if we were to take 100,000 ADA of that and use that to pay audits early on to show that this model works and it's interesting, it's providing assurance, and then use that to supplement the model until the trading fees had gone up? Because again, I think that if you're showing that the work that you're doing is good and people are actually caring about it, it makes people more interested in the token, and then it would theoretically make people more likely to want to trade it. And I would also say, and this is something that you can't really plan on, but people speculate on everything in blockchain, right? So how much trading that they're going to be doing, it could be completely independent of us as well. Anything that we're doing, there's people buying and selling based on whatever they're doing that for, right? Sure. But initially, if we're not hitting those volumes, mostly the 30% participation rewards that we have our own tokens to use, and then would possibly dip into the ISPO funding that we raise as well.
I have one more question, and this is in honor of Sam who's on mute right now. So was there a lot of time spent on determining which bonding curve you were going to use for creating and releasing that initial, the initial token?
Yeah, so I think he kind of touched on this early, that you kind of come up with the initial plan early on, like the first days, and then it kind of morphs from there, right? And, ideally before you start releasing tokens to the public, I'd say it's okay to kind of change the plan around and say, okay, well, first we did this, then we did this. Once you start releasing tokens, then it becomes less acceptable to say, hey, we said we were going to have an allocation of 30% for this or 20% for that. So yeah, it was a lot. I'd say it's changed 5 or 6 times from the first time that I wrote it. And you look at what other people are doing, like that's one of the other things I think is great in this space, is there's a lot of people that are trying to build DAOs that you can look at and try to learn from and say, hey, like they have this model to accomplish certain tasks. That's something that maybe we should incorporate. Or, these guys, they kept a 50% allocation for this. The community hates it, so like you get to look around and see what other people are doing and kind of take the best of it and kind of drop the worst of it. So yeah, it was a lot of back and forth to try to figure out exactly what the optimal situation was.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, great questions. I think it definitely improves it. So if there's anything going through, then let's definitely have them.
Eric, real quick, do you have any resources later on? Obviously, we probably should wait for you to finish first, but regarding kind of how you figured out, the 30%, the optimal kind of reward, system and such.
Yeah, I think for some of that, I think I might have some slides that touch on it, and then at the very end can kind of comment on those as well. I think, for some of them, I don't know, man. Some of it I'd say is more art than science. Being in the space for a while, I think one of the big things is dev team allocation or insider allocation. And I think that's something that everyone really cares about. And I think that has really big implications, right? And so initially when we put our we ended up getting funded through Project Catalyst to get our start. And I think when I made that proposal a year ago, I had 30% of the tokens reserved for the dev team, which is a humongous allocation, and hadn't put too much thought into that, right? And so I think in the end, the core dev team is ended up with 12% overall, and then some reserved for future people that might be coming in. But again, I think a lot of it is looking at what the industry is doing and looking at what people are commenting or the responses to those. For insider allocation or dev team, there's always that concern that people are getting these tokens. Are they going to be dumping them on their, the token holders early on? That's always a concern that people don't like. Or even for a DAO, how much control do these initial people have over the DAO that, it's not really a DAO if the dev team owns 40% of the tokens and can influence every single decision, right? And so I think for each one of those, it's, is this fair to the community? Is this fair to the team? And is it going to accomplish our goals, right? And so looking at each of them, for the 30% that was for participation rewards, I was looking at the different pieces of the pie that what I thought we would need to be able to accomplish our goals, how much work there might be involved there, and how much that token might be able to accomplish, and how long of a period it would be able to go for, right? So, for participation rewards, we would want to have that going for years and years and years until it was established enough that it can be reduced over time, right? So kind of a long-winded answer, but yeah, there's quite a bit that goes into it, but I think a lot of it is more art than science. And some you're making tables and charts to try to figure it out, but it's more at the end of the day, what is fair to the community that's going to be involved in this, and what's fair to the people that are putting it out.
Wonderful. That makes sense. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, let's if there's any more, otherwise we'll move on to the next one. Okay, I swear this PowerPoint is giving me problems. I press it and it doesn't move on. All right, so one of the added benefits, we said that for this model, it's being paid for by our treasury, right? That's a little bit unusual. Usually a dev team would go through and they would fund their own audits, and that's the norm. In public accounting, Coca-Cola is paying for their own audit. In blockchain, liquid finance or whatever protocol is out there is paying for their own audit normally, right? However, this is kind of an issue, or it's becoming an issue. Smart contract audits are extremely expensive. You know, it can run from $10,000 for the most basic thing that you can imagine to 100,000 plus for something that's actually extensive for a really complicated protocol, right? So it's becoming a situation where only the most well-funded teams are able to afford these. When we talk about blockchain, one of the things that I like a lot and a lot of people like a lot is it's inclusive and it wants to open up things for everybody, right? But if we're creating a situation where only people that were able to raise millions of dollars in their funding rounds are able to get these and prove to the community that their projects their products are safe to use, it's kind of creating this gatekeeping function where only certain ones are able to release, right? I would argue that for crypto to really be inclusive, we need to have critical infrastructure that's available for all. And part of that critical infrastructure would be audit services. So the fact that we're self-funded, to get an audit from us, you have to create a proposal and make an argument. Say, we think that we deserve an audit, or we think that we should be auditing this project because it's providing a great service to the community, it's a new and innovative idea, you know, whatever that is. But as long as you can articulate that well and convince the token holders that this is worthwhile, you have a shot of getting an audit. And so it's a lot of smaller projects that might not have been able to do this, that would have just released anyways. It creates kind of a slippery slope where the industry is now getting flooded with unaudited projects, and it can create a bit of a concern. So by having this infrastructure there that we're providing, it's also, you know, I think it's a good way to perform audits, to have it so that there's no conflict of interest, but it also makes it so a lot of these projects are able to get it. I would also argue that for our particular model, I would say that these smaller projects would likely be our niche, especially early on, right? There's a lot of projects out there that are really, really complicated and involved, and they would probably want to have a bespoke audit service like runtime verification, or, you know, one of the big guys where they pay the money and they get the customized service. That's okay too, right? But by having the smaller projects that weren't funded and weren't able to do that, I think that would probably be the ones that would be most interested in something like this early on. So, you know, perhaps it would morph later on so that, you know, all the big players would be interested in that as well. But if I were to opine on it, I think that that would be our niche, at least at the very start. Okay. So the DYOR tool. So this is the first product we released. It was a couple months ago, and it was initially meant to be part of the overall audit program. So we would want to have the audit report that would touch on the smart contract. You know, it'd be someone going through the code and providing an analysis or a bug report and saying, you know, here's the vulnerabilities that we found. But it would also include this other part that the average person is able to understand, right? So, you know, the average person reading an audit report usually isn't going to understand most of the really technical stuff. However, if there's a commentary or report that talks about the development team, the tokenomics, the community, the ICO trading metrics, that's a really good part to include that everybody else would really be able to understand and be able to say, I like these parts of this project. This is something that I want to use or invest in, or, you know, whatever. And so as we were developing it, we came to the realization that this is something that anybody can use. Like, you know, it doesn't take a professional auditor to be able to generate one of these. It's something that anybody in the community can use. So we decided to kind of spin that off and say, we're going to put this out there. It's something that you can use. Like if you're a newcomer, it walks you through step by step for each one of these. So like looking at the dev team, are they anonymous? Let's check this out. And it walks you through the steps of trying to figure out, you know, all of these different things. It gives you explanations of why that research point is important, and you enter some information and it will generate a report for you. So it's just something that we kind of spun off. This is a summary of, you know, there's like a little mini summary report, and then there's a full, you know, PDF that generates after that. But, you know, just sharing that, that's one of the kind of first products that we actually released. All right, so that was most of the stuff specific. I'll as I'm going through these, I'll touch on, like, you know, our journey, or, you know, how we did that. But again, it was kind of just stuff that I thought was interesting for, you know, coming up with a project or trying to develop something in crypto, right? So the first one was coming up with an idea. I would say that when we were doing it, or the way that I think is a good way to do it, is trying to think what problem currently exists in traditional systems and how can you solve this problem with blockchain, right? So my example was the conflict of interest that comes from paying for an audit service, right? I always kind of use this example that when I started my career at Deloitte, we were in the audit room and we would, be finding things and we would present them to our boss, who would then present them to the CEO or the CFO, and then they would come in the audit room and they'd yell at us for about 45 minutes. And then we would say, oh, actually, it's a footnote, or, it's you change your opinion a little bit. And not to say that anyone is committing fraud, but it has an impact on how you do your work or how you see things at the very least, right? So that was something that I've always thought was a problem in the audit industry, right? And then once crypto came along, it's like, okay, by having a token, we can have it so it's a community-driven approach. And by also having the token, we can create this self-funding model that we cut out that kind of middleman, right? So it was looking at something that I thought was an issue or I thought was a problem and looking at how we can solve that with blockchain, right? I personally think that that's a good way of going about it. If people are coming up with ideas for projects, that's usually something that I keep in mind. The other thing that I think is important to keep in mind is the question, does decentralizing this make sense? So for blockchain, I think most of us would agree that decentralization is the name of the game. When you're looking at these things, you can use a traditional database, you could use a SQL database, and it is going to be cheaper and faster and simpler than anything that you're going to do on blockchain, right? The reason that you would want to do it on blockchain is this idea of decentralization, right? It makes it so that people that are involved, you're able to build trust with each other because it's a distributed ledger and everybody can see everything that's going on. You don't need some kind of centralized entity to be able to do it. And so when you're thinking about your project, I would keep that in mind. If you're looking at it and saying, we want to decentralize finance. Okay, I think you have something there. Traditional finance, it doesn't go into certain markets because it's unprofitable. There's been historic issues with, giving certain people loans versus others not getting them. There's a lot of problems that have been, coming with traditional finance. So having a decentralized model, it really makes sense, right? When you think about, hey, let's decentralize television. Well, maybe not. Like, someone's writing the television shows. You need to have the production companies that are doing it. Like certain things, I don't know if you can make an argument of why that's going to make sense to make a decentralized version of it, right? And so that's something that when I'm looking at or critiquing or judging projects is this a decentralized version of it? And if it's not, then why are we building it on the blockchain in the first place, right? It's just something that I'm kind of big on. The other is, does it need a token, right? So when you're building your project or you're coming up with your idea, there's a lot of stuff that you can build, and sometimes it really makes sense to include a token, and sometimes it seems like kind of a gimmick, right? And so kind of determining what is it that we're putting out there? Does it truly benefit by having a token involved? If so, great, add it in there. If not, maybe reconsider it or think of different ways to monetize it, because then it almost becomes kind of like a gimmick, right? So yeah, those are the comments on there. The next one is on writing a white paper. So I found this to be a pretty, for this project, this was the first time I had done that. I would say, most of the people that are watching this, some of them are involved with the business school. I think it's a very similar concept to writing a business plan, right? It helps explain to people what your project is about. I would say that the biggest benefit of it is it helps you build out your idea and think through all the different angles, right? Similar to writing a business plan. You think of how you're going to finance it. You think of how you're going to advertise it. All these different aspects of it, you're able to really think through while you're writing this paper. So it's an invaluable thing, not only because it shares it with the people that are potentially going to be investing or using in your project, but it's going to help you build it out. I would also say, try to do it as good as you can at the start, but don't feel like you have to have everything worked out right from the beginning. I think that we kind of touched on this earlier, but ideas change, they evolve. You start and it's this, and it kind of moves towards this. So you want to have everything done or thought out as well as possible, but if it's evolving as you go through, I don't think that's a bad thing. Just keep updating your community, keep updating your white paper, and don't feel like you had to have every single thing figured out at the first day that you're doing it, right? Okay. All right, then the next part was building a team. I would say that this is easier said than done. So all of you at the college, I think that's great because there's a lot of talented people from all different walks of life that are taking, different courses or different specialties. That is such a cool time to be doing something like this. For me, I graduated in 2011, so it wasn't really an industry at the time, unfortunately. But I think that building something like this in college is a really, really cool thing. For me, I found it to be very difficult to find people to work on certain things. We're building it on Cardano, as mentioned, and I think where you choose to build is going to have a big impact on how you're going to build your team, right? So on Ethereum, for instance, everyone knows Ethereum. There you have the most devs, right? It also has, pros and cons because it's also extremely crowded, right? On Ethereum, there's 10 projects for anything that you could imagine. It's really hard to stand out. So while it may be easier to recruit some devs that know Solidity, you're one in a million of different people coming out there, right? On Cardano, there are not too many devs at the moment. Like it's in Haskell, / Plutus, which is a bit of a more obscure programming language. More and more people are learning it every day, but still there's so much demand that everybody that's really good at it seems to already be involved in a project, right? However, the other side of the coin is that there's a lot of opportunity. If you come up with a unique idea, there's a good chance you may be the only one, unless it's just a copy and paste of something from Ethereum. But if you came out with a project that we're going to do whatever it may be, there's a good chance that you may be the only one, or there will be very few of them. So I personally think that that's not a bad way to go. It may be hard to recruit them initially, but you're really going to have less of that competition, and you're going to have a lot of people that are interested because there's less applications already. So everyone's really hungry or wanting to use the ones that are coming out. Where do you find them? There's Discord, there's Twitter, there's Reddit, there's personal networking. For Cardano, they have different communities with devs on Reddit and a couple on Discord, and was able to find a really good guy on there that's been, great. But it was difficult and still can be depending on what you're trying to do. So just something to think in mind when you're starting off. What chain you're going to build on is really going to have a big impact on how you're going to be able to form a team.
I have a question. Why Cardano versus the other non-Ethereum blockchains? And I do understand, and you make very good points, less crowded, though less developers, and so perhaps a greater opportunity. But why Cardano versus, Solana or something else?
Another excellent question. So for me personally, I think there might be different preferences for a lot of that stuff too. As we covered in a different slide, decentralization is the name of the game, right? Or for many of us, it is, right? So when you look at all the different main competitors to Ethereum, I would argue that Cardano is one of the few that is actually trying to build a decentralized solution to it, right? So you have Solana, and that is actually quite popular, and they have 30 billion in total value locked, and it's an option. However, it's more of a centralized solution that doesn't appeal to people that kind of really, really appreciate that decentralized approach, right? Same with Algorand. It's a fine, chain. They're very fast, and they have that academic approach. Cool stuff there, right? However, and me personally, I feel like I argue with some people on it, or people have different takes. But the fact that they use those centralized relays to achieve that really fast speed, it's not as decentralized as a solution. Then also, Cardano has it so that it's a really low investment to be able to start a node, right? If you want to start a stake pool, you can do it for a pretty cheap amount of money in starting up your hardware costs, right? On Solana, it's going to cost you, I forget what the figure was, but $10,000. It was pretty high, right? So being able to get that low barrier to entry, it makes it so that there's a lot of people that are involved in it, right? And then at the end of the day too, Cardano has these smaller blocks that aren't, creating for Algorand and for Solana and for these other ones, you end up having terabytes of data that are being stored every year. And perhaps they're going to have some solutions of, why that's not going to be an issue. But as of right now, I think it's concerning where that all adds up and you eventually have it so that we're going to store 50 terabytes of data. It makes it so that the average person isn't really being able to run a node, right? And so Cardano's been one of my favorites for a while. I like the academic approach to it. I like the decentralized aspect of it. And so that was why I decided to go with that. I think that Tezos also has a lot going for it, and they also are, a decentralized solution. So I thought that one was pretty cool, but I'm a big proponent on Cardano. I'm really happy that that's the one that I chose. I feel like the community around it is really welcoming and really supportive. I've met a lot of really cool people through it. And so, really happy with the decision, but that was my thought process, at least. And not to say, if someone chooses something else, I don't have an issue with it. I think there's pros and cons to everything, right? So I ideally would like it if the industry wasn't so angry at each other for choosing one versus the other, right? Like at the end of the day, I think if one of us wins, we all kind of win, right? So if someone does choose to build on Algorand or Solana or whatever it is, I think that we shouldn't be mad at them, right?
Yeah, no, I like that, and that helps. That helps. I wanted to understand better your thinking on the selection of Cardano.
Yeah, and then there's going to be pros and cons for each of them. The fees for them and the speeds and how many devs they have, and it's just this whole hodgepodge of different information. But when looking at all that, Cardano seemed like the right choice for me. It's just getting started, so that all these things that are releasing, people that are choosing to build on it now, from my my experience with it, they get a lot of attention and they get a lot of support, and so it's I think it's a pretty desirable place to build.
Question: are you planning to provide sort of recurrent audit services to the intended clients that would use the audit capabilities, or trying to understand a little bit more how that client, those that would be audited, how do they interact with your smart contracts?
So the community would choose a project, right? And they'd say, here's this one that's going to be releasing in the near future. We want to audit over them to make sure if we're going to be locking our funds in it, that it's not going to get stolen. Okay. So then the audit would get approved. If it did get approved by the community, then we would reach out to them and we'd say, hey, you've been selected by our organization to provide you with a free audit. I would say more often than not, they'd probably already be aware of it. And I would say more often than not, like we talked about, they'd be the smaller projects that possibly propose it on their own in the first place. Like anyone that buys a token can make a proposal, right? So I could see a situation where dev teams are buying tokens so that they could say, hey, we would like to have us included in the consideration, right? Okay. But then you would reach out to them and say, we would like to do this. Ideally, they're open to it and they say, hey, this is good publicity and this is a good way for us to get assurance over our smart contract. Great, we'll be happy to support you if you need anything, right? If it was a team that was not keen on it and they said, no, we stay away from us, we don't want anything to do with you, it would have to be projects that are open source for us to be able to do it, right? So like any project that is open source, their code's available and it's open for anybody to look at. If it's not, and they don't want us to audit them, then that's not something that we'd be able to do, right? And so you would go through, you would perform the audit. And then if there was things that were found that were concerning, you would first present it to the dev team and say, these are the results of the audit. For one, if it's already up and running, you don't want to say, hey, here's an exploit where you can drain the entire funds and share that with everybody because you don't want somebody to do it, right? So you would take the results, present it to the audit team, give them a chance to comment and correct anything if it's already out there. And then you would share the report with the community. That would kind of be a standalone thing. So it's not like version 2 comes out, okay, that automatically means that that's something that we would cover for them. It would be on a one-to-one basis where the community would say, hey, version 2 just came out. Let's take a look at that as well. I would say the other thing to that, there would kind of be a continuous review as well. So for any audit that we had, there would be the opportunity that people can still look through that because, no audit is going to be 100%, right? There's always things that may have been missed. So there's going to be the opportunity where someone could look through past audits and see if they found anything that someone missed. If they did, then they would be rewarded or compensated for that as well. So on the platform, they can constantly be looking through and say, hey, you guys audited these guys 3 months ago. You missed this thing right here. and it would have a similar thing where it's kept confidential at first to avoid someone using that exploit. But, you know, people are rewarded if there was anything that was missed initially, that would be a continuous process where they could look through it.
Okay, okay, that helps.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, a lot of good questions from you.
Thank you.
All right. All right, so we've written our white paper. The next part is making people care about it, right? I would say this is the most difficult part. You know, finding the people to work on your project with you was hard. This is harder, right? I feel like a lot of the time it feels like you're screaming into the void, right? You write a quality 10-page article that's making a case of why this is a problem in the industry and brilliant solutions and all that. 2 people read it, maybe 2 people open it. And, you know, occasionally you get a few that have, you know, a couple hundred people read and you feel really good. But for the most part, not too much engagement. Then at the same time, you make a low effort tweet that says, ADA going to the moon this month, and you get 500 likes and 200 retweets. And it can be a little bit frustrating at times, if I'm being honest. But overall, being able to effectively market your product and explain why people should care about it is going to determine a big part of your success here. And so even if it does feel like you may be screaming in the void sometimes, or that people aren't paying attention, I think that a lot of people do notice, they just don't engage with it. They don't, you know, click on it or they don't comment on it, but they are noticing, right? And as it grows over time, the more people that seem to care about things, the more people seem to care about things, right? So like, if you have 2 followers on Twitter, there's an interesting phenomenon where you don't have too many other followers, right? If you have 10,000 followers on Twitter, you gain a couple hundred every day. Like, people like what other people like at the end of the day, right? And so it kind of, you know, grows over time, you keep at it. But again, it all comes back to being able to explain why this is important and why people should care about it. It's going to serve you well throughout the entire time that you're working on whatever project that you're doing. All right, and then another one. So you've come up with how you're going to describe it, or, you know, why people should care about this. How are you going to market it, right? For blockchain, I would say that Twitter, Reddit, Discord, Telegram, and Medium are all the biggest platforms that most people do. I would say that it's interesting that there's some people that love Twitter, hate Discord. Some people that love Reddit, hate Telegram. Like, it seems like it kind of runs the spectrum, right? Where different people like different things. Casting that wide net and having a presence on all of them, it can be a good idea, but it can also be difficult, right? If you have some mods that are interested in your project and are willing to be part of the community and moderate those things, you can have a presence on all those, and that's usually a good thing. If you're a smaller team, you might have to pick and choose and say, hey, we're going to start on Twitter. Maybe we'll do a Discord if we end up growing. But I would say that anyone that's building a project here, I would say that is usually the focus, trying to have a presence on these things. And that seems, for us, that's been a really good way to try to build interest and build a community. Because at the end of the day, too, if you're building a DAO is only as strong as the members that make it up, right? That's like one of the unique things where it's not, hey, we have this killer product that, you know, people are using. It's an organization. And if the organization is strong and having people to participate in it, you have a good DAO. You know, if you have 10 people that are in it and they're barely voting, it's you can still do some good stuff, right? But that's kind of defeating the purpose of having one of these types of organizations. The other thing I would say about that is the internet is cruel. So as you're going out, even if you guys are great and you have an excellent product that you're putting out there, there's going to be some mean comments and some hatred out there. And that's just the nature of the beast, I feel like. And so try to shrug it off. You know, if you're acting in good faith, then you're doing fine, but be prepared for some mean and nasty comments. And it's unfortunately just it's the nature of the beast, I would say. The other thing I'll say about marketing is bots are bad. So we kind of talked about the more popular you are, the more popular you become, right? It can make it tempting for people to say, hey, I can buy 20,000 Twitter followers for like $200. Like, you know, it's pretty low barrier to entry, and it may have, you know, a good effect on my project. I really recommend that you do not do this. everyone can tell. Like if you have 20,000 followers and you get no engagement on the things that you put out there, people notice that kind of stuff, right? At the end of the day, it looks really, I think it looks bad in my opinion that, you know, at the end of the day, it's dishonest. And people that are willing to do that, you say, hey, you know, what else are they cutting corners on, or what else, you know, it puts other things into question, right? And so it can be tempting. A lot of people do it, but I really, really do not think it's the right way. It's not going to grow your product. It's not going to grow your users. And it looks fishy. And I call projects out all the time for it. So as you're going through and thinking about it, do it organically. It's going to serve you better in the long run, in my opinion. All right, now raising funds. I think this is one of the ones that is more interesting to a lot of people, right? So there's various options with various costs and benefits, you know, a lot of different ways to do it. One of them is grants. For Cardano in particular, they have something called Project Catalyst. That's actually how we got started. I created a proposal and I said, hey, this is the idea that we want to implement. And the token holders for Cardano can vote and say, hey, we want to fund this or we want to fund that. So if you are interested in Cardano, I think you should definitely give that a look. I think that for one, it gets you some funding. It also gets you some credibility in the community. Like the community cares about these projects. Most of them want to see them grow and they want to support them. So, you know, I follow Cardano more often. I'm sure they have an equivalent of a grant program on most of these other chains. You know, Tezos, there's one I'm aware of. I'm sure they have them on Solana, all over the place, right? So I think, especially for students, I think that filling these out and requesting funds through those is a great way to get a start, or, you know, get the ball rolling. Another one is launch pads, which I personally, they're very popular, you know, in the crypto industry. I personally don't love them. You can kind of think of them like an investment bank. They're not exactly like an investment bank. They're not doing a whole lot of valuation work like an investment bank would be doing. They will comment on that a little bit. They're mostly going to market it and they're mostly going to sell it. So, you know, essentially, you would pick a date and they would have their platform and say, hey, we're going to sell 1% of your supply for, you know, a goal of $600,000 or 600,000 ADA. And they would keep a cut of it. So for their effort, they would take 10% or 7% or whatever that is. And theoretically, they would be marketing it for you or have, you know, a large community of investors that buy. And that's a very I would say probably the most popular one. Most of them, I get a bad vibe from a lot of them. You know, when they do their marketing, it's mostly bot driven. It seems to be, you know, they have an incentive to try to do as many as possible, as fast as possible, because that's what ends up earning them the most revenue, right? So instead of really vetting them and saying, hey, is this a really quality project that we believe in and we have faith in and we want to support? It's more, let's kind of churn them out, right? So there are some good ones, I'm sure. And if you do your homework, I'm sure you could find some ones that you would be proud to work with. But I would really, really look into it closely, because it can have, if you're working with someone that ends up, you know, having a bunch of projects they release that are doing exit scams or doing rug pulls, it's a bad look for your project at the end of the day, because you have some level of association with them, right? Another one is for venture capitalists. You know, private investors, you know, maybe not a full VC, but private investment. That's an option. They usually want a large cut of the equity early on. Some of them can provide guidance or, you know, help you through your journey. So, you know, that's a potential option. We talked about ISPOs, which are specific to Cardano. Adam gave us a bit of an explanation for that. And then you can always get a bank loan, which I would not recommend. You know, this is a high risk industry. If anybody is trying to take, the majority of people listening to this, I don't think you would be able to get a bank loan for it in the first place, but it's a risky thing to be doing. I personally wouldn't recommend that. One of the overall things that I would be thinking about while you're trying to raise funds is this concept of a fair launch, right? So in crypto, one of the things that I like about it is that it kind of has this ethos of fairness. You know, a lot of people care about that kind of stuff. This concept of fair launch is everybody getting access at a similar time, right? So, you know, if you're doing an initial sale or a seed round or whatever it is, anybody in the community has access to it at the same price, right? This is in contrast to a scenario where you say, okay, we're going to let a handful of people come in at the very beginning and buy a huge amount of the supply at 1,000th of the price that the everyday person would be able to do it, right? That creates a potential where later on, the people that bought it at 1/1000th of the price are going to want to make a return on their investment, right? Which makes sense. Like that's what business is, right? But the fact that you allowed that, it means that anybody now that's buying it early on is probably going to have a lot of selling pressure that they have to deal with and crashing the price on them, right? So however you think about raising your funds, I would have that in the back of my mind of, is this going to be fair and equitable overall to the community? And I think for the most part, that's something that the community notices and it's something they care about. And when you do think about that, or you do that, then they are more likely to support you or want to participate in whatever it is that you're doing. Okay, and then just a couple general tips that I've found over the years. So take every meeting. I have found that, you know, you'll get emails, hey, I like your project, I'm doing something completely unrelated, would you like to have a call? Take the meeting, you know, or some of them are completely related to what you're doing, but I have not had a single meeting that I did not think was beneficial and that I did not get something out of. At the very least, you're networking and you're describing your project and you're honing your craft and getting better at explaining it. On the high end of the spectrum, you're meeting some really cool people that end up becoming, you know, friends or, you know, colleagues and help you throughout the way. You know, that's, I can't stress that enough. That's actually how Adam and I became acquainted. And there's a lot of people I've gotten to meet throughout the time. And, you know, like I said, some of them you'll think that this might not be too related to whatever it is you're doing, but they have all been beneficial. So take every meeting, I think is important. Another one is reputation is everything. The internet has a long memory. Acting in good faith, it is noticed and it is remembered. Acting in bad faith, it will follow you around. So maybe this project, some questionable moves were made. Your next project, it's going to suffer a little bit from it, right? So just acting in good faith, trying to do your best. That doesn't mean that you can't make mistakes. You know, everybody does make mistakes, but just acting in good faith and trying to do that, it is something that is important, and particularly when you're building a blockchain project, I think. And the last thing, I'll repeat it, you're going to get some hate out there. You know, whatever you're doing, if you're in the public eye and you're joining spaces and discussing, or you're putting yourself out there on Twitter, there's going to be people that don't like it. They may call you a scammer. They may, you know, whatever it is, try not to take it too personally. The internet can be cruel at times, but that's just part of it. And, you know, persevere. And then to learn more, I put a couple of links there for our website, Twitter, Discord, Reddit, email. You know, for the email, if anybody who's watching this wants to reach out, just say that you're from the UIUC. Like I said, I take meetings. So if you want to discuss or bounce some ideas off or whatever, I'm more than happy to do that. And so, yeah, that's the way to contact me, and I seriously am willing to talk to anybody or provide any kind of help that I can. I think that was everything that I had prepared.
That's amazing. That's amazing, Scott. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Eric. That's just an awesome playbook to share with any students who are looking to become entrepreneurs in this space, I think.
Yeah, I just want to thank you, because you just really laid out a roadmap, and it was just very, like, you know, transparent, candid, and made me think of things that I wouldn't even have known to think about. Super impactful.
Awesome. Appreciate that. Yeah, like I said, I wasn't too sure what to present on or what to talk about. These are, you know, several things that have just come out over the last year or so. But yeah, really appreciate the kind words. And yeah, I appreciate you guys bringing me on. It was nice to talk to you all about it.
Did we say, hey Sam, are you posting the deck to Slack, or how do we get access to the deck again? Because there's a lot of information on there.
I think that would be Adam, perhaps, who might be able to share with us.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. So what I'm going to do, I'll be putting this up on the Champaign Blockchain Meetup YouTube channel. So hi everybody who's watching it now, and we'll be sharing this out through our blockchain mailing list, as well as to the Disruption Lab. And please share it with your friends. Let other people who are interested in this space know that they can come here to learn more about SCAT DAO, more about the Champaign Blockchain Meetup Group, and the Disruption Lab at Gies College of Business at the University of Illinois. So we have a lot of exciting stuff going on here. I'll thank Eric again for giving an excellent presentation on his project. Sam, thanks for giving us this opportunity to present to Gies and to be part of the Disruption Lab's educational content, and to just be here with you. And also, Sonoa, thank you so much for being our discussant and asking such great questions. So we really appreciate it.
Yeah, those are some great questions. Really enhanced it. So appreciate you.
And thank you for your patience answering them as well.
Oh, they were all excellent. Yeah, no patient required.
And thank you, Sam, for drawing us all in and exposing this great audience, as always. Sam is just an amazing mentor, an amazing, very knowledgeable. If you want to know anything about bonding curves.
Yeah, bonding curve.
Very complicated topic, but fundamental to blockchain. So
it's fun. It's being fun. Eric, if you don't mind, maybe later on, like when we have real world practical issues with the DAO and introduction, all that stuff, token allocation, ICO pricing, all these things, we'll probably trouble you again, just to give us some advice and guidance on that, if you don't mind.
Sure. Yeah. Just let me know. Always happy to help.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.